Hi, and welcome back to Beans and Bezels. I've owned Oris watches in the past, albeit for a short period of time, but this is the first Oris to make it to a review. I think Oris makes great watches, with excellent build quality and finishing. Their prices are also not difficult to reason with once you factor in the typical 20 to 25% discounts that you should be able to get from most dealers. I'd say that Oris is more popularly known for their range of dive watches, and I've owned both the Aquis and the Diver 65 in the past. But today I'll be taking a look at their Big Crown ProPilot. This is the previous generation with the printed hour numerals instead of the additively manufactured three-dimensional looking numerals. This watch has a retail price of around 1550 US dollars, but you should be able to get them for around 1200 US dollars from your nearest Oris dealer. Let's check it out. I measured the case to be 40.5 millimeters in diameter, 48 millimeters from lug to lug, and 12.15 millimeters tall. As you'd expect from an entirely utilitarian watch, it is entirely brushed with no polished accents. The case is actually my favorite aspect of this watch and the only real reason to pick this watch over the dozens of other pilot watches in the category. The mid-case extends, tapers and curves into a pair of lugs that feel like a true extension of the case. I don't know much about sports cars, but these lugs feel like they belong on one. The build quality and finishing on the case is quite exceptional. To make this even better, you have a slightly recessed fixed bezel section that has a very light engraving on the outer half of the bezel. The design may seem a bit ridiculous, but it's executed very well and I think it looks and feels great. The partially engraved bezel also minimizes any glare that you might observe on a more polished or even entirely brushed bezel. True to the name, you have a very well-proportioned 6.5mm signed screw-down crown that is extremely comfortable and easy to operate. The grip is excellent and the crown has no wobble. Flipping it over, you have a screw-down case back with an exhibition window. This watch is rated for up to 100 meters of water resistance, which is good for a pilot's watch. The dial is very plain, lackluster, and unforgettably ordinary. But those appear to be the ideal ingredients for most pilot watches since the design objective is legibility and not design extravagance. There's a printed outer minute track printed in white against a matte black dial background. There are slim white ticks for the minute markers and larger bold rectangles for each increment of 5. The printing quality is great here. There is a special marker for the 12 o'clock to help orient the watch, equivalent to the triangle on a flieger dial. You then have printed Arabic numerals that are well proportioned, easy to read and loomed. Again, the finishing around these indices is great and no complaints from me here. You have a date window at the 3 o'clock position that has a dial matched date wheel background and white text. I don't usually like 3 o'clock date windows, but this one is very stealthy and I think deserves some praise. The finishing here is great too. The brand's logo is printed under the 12 o'clock index and the watch name above the 6 o'clock index. The handset matches the simple and highly functional dial design with large white hands for the hour and minutes, which have painted black bases to make it appear as though they're floating on the dial. The seconds hand follows a similar design style, except most of the hand is painted black except for a high contrast red tip. At a quick glance, it really does look like two floating white hands and a floating red tip, so good design work here. The lume on this watch is quite good and in typical pilot watch fashion, very easy to read too. All the loomed elements are BGW9 Super Luminova and the hands are much more generously loomed than the printed indices. I suspect that the newer models with the solid three-dimensional indices will perform significantly better than this. This isn't bad, it's just not great. The 3D indices add a lot of character to the dial too. The hands are great though, they glow bright and have good longevity as well. Overall, I wouldn't say that this is one of the best loomed watches out there, but it's good enough for the most of us. This watch uses a modified Sellita SW220-1 movement. I was surprised to see a 220 in there instead of a 200, but I suspect that they repurposed the same movement base from their big date version of the same watch. The movement looks clean but lacks any kind of interesting decoration, so this is likely a standard grade movement with some in-house modification. You also have the iconic Oris red rotor, and the movement delivers an overall modest but clean appearance. I really would have preferred a bit more decoration for a watch in this price category though. On my time grapher, I observed roughly -8 seconds per day in the dial up position and -2 seconds per day in the crown up position. The 40.5mm case diameter and 48mm lug-to-lug width fit well on my wrist. You would expect a 40.5mm diameter watch without a large bezel to appear large on my 6¼ inch wrist, but this doesn't feel that way. The height of 12.15mm, the flat case back and curved lugs help it sit comfortably on my wrist too, and the weight feels well balanced. This particular watch came with their fabric strap, which feels like a hybrid between sailcloth and cordura. It has an interesting clasp design that requires you to insert the strap into the clasp and then fold it back inwards. To wrap this up, I like this watch, but I'm not sure I'm convinced that it's the best available pilot watch out there. I found the Laco Münsterblau Stunde 42mm to be a lot more enjoyable for around $1,200 retail. But I think with pilot watches, since they all share so much in common where design cues are concerned, it becomes a highly subjective matter. I will say that the case on the Oris feels a lot more modern and robust, and this has the added feature of a screw-down crown compared to the Laco. So if you really like this watch, there's nothing that should stop you from buying it. I would recommend getting the newer dial with the three-dimensional indices instead. And make sure to find the best deal available. Once again, thanks for watching and don't forget to read my other reviews in the link below.